I am beyond done with this game. I started it for some variety on the channel, but about 3 episodes in I realised it was a colossal mistake making a playthrough on a game with pretty much nothing occurring in it to comment on. I am now here out of obligation and not passion, so let's clear Titanic Monarch and get the credits rolling. For once, I had the wherewithal to go through my footage and mark where interesting things happened during my run, so let's just get that marked up timeline up on the screen. Yeah, there we go. Every vaguely notable thing, and I am talking the most basic, I can vaguely mention it in the script things, is represented by a blue marker. Ugh. Let's start from the start. Marker 1. My game booted up with the CRT SARP filter applied. I don't know why, but it did. I toyed with the idea of keeping it active, but figured it'd be confusing to have it only be active on the final episode of a 12-part playthrough. Imagine if you got to the final episode of a TV series only for it to change aspect ratio for no reason. Marker 2. Comment on the music. Yeah, if there's one thing I can definitely give Titanic Monarch, it has to have one of the best streaks of music in any Sonic game. Act 1, Act 2 and the Phantom Egg all have ridiculously good music tracks, and even when the levels themselves are ho-hum at best, the combination of strange gothic architecture with giant machinery with a similarly eclectic suite of songs will drag you through. Marker 3. The Broken Poles. A minute into the level, I came across the first set of these poles, which come up a couple of times between Act 1 and 2. They didn't work. If I did anything upon touching them beyond putting down my controller and letting the game run its course, I'd lose my momentum and get stuck, although Tails handily is able to get you unstuck in most cases. Various markers. I did a couple of bonus stages, although they never turned out well. I never found any special stages either. In fact, I didn't seem to find many secrets of any kind, because Titanic Monarch feels really linear, whether it's due to a complete lack of motivation to dig particularly deep on my end, or an actual aspect of the level design. The most an alternate route seems to ever give you is some extra rings and a 5-second detour off your main path. It means the level design isn't hugely memorable in Act 1, because you feel like you're being escorted down one path, with any deviation being rewarded with nothing at all, crushing deaths, the worst kind of death in a Sonic game, as seen by Marker 7, or seemingly being unable to actually reach the path forward, as seen by having to use Tails at Marker 6 when a platform just deposited me by a wall too high to jump over? I don't know. I spent nearly 8 minutes in Act 1, and I'd like to say I had more than that to say on the penultimate level of the game, the only one that is vertically oriented, but I don't. I was so beyond bored upon reaching Crimson Eye that I only bothered entertaining it for about 10 seconds before deciding to just damage boost through it. Mania's bosses are very quick and easy at the best of times, but damage boosting makes them a complete joke every time, as is the case in most 2D Sonic games. So when Crimson Eye spins its orbs around, walk through them. When you get to the halfway point and it begins messing with gravity while floating around, sit under it, the projectiles will never hit you. Then just jump at the right time before the weird gravity effects take hold, and despite losing all but one of my rings near immediately, I never felt the least bit at risk. In fact, looking back at my footage, I was more at risk of timing out than dying to the boss. Not a great showing for the penultimate fight of the game, but surely the final boss will be better, right? Right. Act 2 of Titanic Monarch is the most unique level in Mania. After a short opening leg, you enter an inner sanctum, from which you can complete 4 chambers in any order you want. Unfortunately, none of the chambers are that hard. They're all just annoying at worst, either because it takes a while to figure out where you're going, or some other factor. I got crushed a few times at one point, but like almost all crushing deaths in a Sonic game, they didn't really feel earned. I got stuck trying to do this section, only later figuring out it was another case of let's level play itself, then later spent 30 seconds bouncing between these plasma globe things. Couldn't find the spring to exit this segment, which threw me for a loop until I eventually glanced in the right place at the right time, but again, I wouldn't say any of this was difficult. It's just momentary annoyances that causes the level to drag on until you figure out what you're doing, with Ruby Mist making any mistakes during platforming minor setbacks. They'd probably be bottomless pit in other games, which would be a lot more dangerous. And the other parts of the chambers were simpler again, barely even worth a mention. Completing all 4 does open up a rift though, leading to the final boss, the Phantom Egg. Let's do this. I don't think anyone's unaware that the Phantom Egg, as potentially the final boss you face in Mania, is quite anticlimactic. And sure, someone might mention that technically the final boss would be Phantom King in Egg Reverie, but come on, that's your bonus reward. Cutscene teasing Sonic forces of all things should not count as a reward. The Phantom Egg needs to match up with bosses like the Death Egg Robot or the Giant Eggman Robo. I don't think anyone's arguing it's anywhere near their tier, you know? It did get me once because I didn't think that jumping into his missiles would avoid them. They only explode when hitting the floor, it turns out, which gave Phantom Shinobi an opportunity to take me out. But the second time turned into a waiting game. Each time you reach a certain threshold, one of the electrified arms explodes, which opens up a new angle to attack from, which makes it easier to destroy the next arm. And the Phantom Heavies that Eggman teleports you to each time he finishes his attack loop are basically just an opportunity to collect some rings. There's just no way for the egg to establish control over the situation once you understand his missiles, especially seeing as he only gets more pathetic with time, which makes it all too easy to wail on him until his exoskeleton cracks and the man drops out. Cue the convenient explosions and encroaching wall of flames, which definitely catch Eggman, he should not be alive after this, and we hop on board a rocket coaster with Knuckles to escape. And what is our reward for our, Jesus, more than a year of grinding out this game? One very low quality animated cutscene of the Titanic Monarch exploding. I mean, the animation is fine, but what the hell happened to it? Why is it so crunchy? Cue credits. Again, I know there's your extra ending if you have all 7 Chaos Emeralds, but it just explains how classic Sonic got from Mania to Forces. None of the endings really explain what happens to the hard-boiled heavies, as an example of a major plot thread that goes unanswered in these closing moments. It's not a particularly satisfying end to your adventure to just have your villainous roster disappear into the aether. So them blowing up or something just ain't it. But it is an ending. So as we sit through the credits and see the long list of people with increasingly debatable reasoning for being there. Directors and programs are fine, obviously, but do we really need... Ooh, typo. Idiot. What was I saying again? Oh yeah, as we sit through the credits, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Mania is a great game, though you probably wouldn't realise that with how much I've complained about finishing it. But it is not good enough to make a 7th playthrough interesting, or attract a crowd 7 years after release, if viewer numbers are anything to go by. I'm just glad that it isn't a playthrough I need to think about anymore. I can move on to doing ring races or something else in my backlog. Maybe something not related to Sonic, to try and get some diversity on the channel. Tomb Raider, Half-Life or Ukulele? Anyone? You can see what games I've got to potentially cover on my backlog. There's a little plug. Indulge me, I don't do them very often. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and the playthrough as a whole, and ciao.